in this tutorial video we're going to be looking at how to use a multi-dimensional array. Now in the previous video we saw how to use a basic array which lets you hold one column of data or one row of data. But there are arrays that exist out there that let you hold more than one column or more than one row, and they are what is known as multi-dimensional arrays. So as an example, think of a spreadsheet with rows and columns. So like this, for example. If you have 6 rows and 5 columns, then your spreadsheet can hold 30 numbers. If you don't believe me, just simply count out the numbers, the squares here, and you'll arrive to 30. So that's the theory behind a multi-dimensional array. Remember, it lets you hold more than one column or more than one row of data, as opposed to a basic array which lets you hold only one column of data or one row of data. So in the example here, this example is basically representing the first 2 rows and the first 2 columns of our spreadsheet here. So this example is representing row 0, row 1, and column A and B. So these 4 elements here, 10, 12, 20 and 45. So like a basic array, let's start from at the beginning of the code here. Like a basic array, you start off by initializing the type of array you want to use. So in this case, an integer. And the only difference here between the basic and the multi-dimensional is, as you can see, we have 2 pairs of brackets as opposed to only 1 pair of brackets for the basic array. Now, the reason we have 2 pairs of square brackets is because we're going to be having more than one column or more than one row. So then, as you can see, we name our array just here, and then the same principle as the basic array, you then initialize the type of columns and rows that you're going to be using in your array. So in this case, an integer. So we're going to be having 2 rows and 2 columns. So the first pair of brackets is for the rows, and the second pair of brackets, of square brackets, is for the columns. So we are having 2 integer rows and 2 integer columns. And then it's the same principle. You start by filling up the elements or assigning a value to the elements according to their index. So just so you understand a bit better, for the first element, which has an index of 0, 0, remember indices always start at 0 and not at 1. If you've forgotten that, look at the previous video. It's pretty well explained in that. So for this first element, which has an index of 0, 0, we're assigning the value of 10, like so. For the second element of the first row, which has an index of 0, 1, we're assigning the value of 12. So 0, 1, 12. Now for the second row, the first element here, 20, has an index of 1 and 0. So as you can see, 1 and 0, we're assigning the value of 20. And for the last element, the second element of the second row, which has an index of 1 and 1, which we've written here, which is written in the example here, 1 and 1, we're assigning the value of 45. And then basically we're just, at the end here, we're printing out the values of the elements according to their index. So in the next step, we're going to try this out in Eclipse. So meet me in the next step. So now let's try to declare and initialize a multi-dimensional array in Eclipse. So to start off with, let's start by declaring the type of multi-dimensional array we want to use. So we want to use an integer multi-dimensional array. So int, and because it's a multi-dimensional array, we need two pairs of square brackets, one for the rows, one for the columns. Then we're going to name our array an array for this example, like so. Next line. Now it's the same principle. We're going to declare the type of rows and columns and how many rows and columns we want to use. So an array equal new. So to begin with, the type, so we want to use integer rows and columns, so int, and then we want to use 2 rows and 2 columns, for example. So just some bonus information, because we have 2 rows and 2 columns, technically it's called a two-dimensional array, but you can still use the term multi-dimensional. Basically, the term multi-dimensional is when you have an array that has more than 1 column or more than 1 row. So now that we've declared the multi-dimensional array that we want to use, we're going to fill in the elements of our array. So starting by the first row, an array, and then we have to use the indices. So remember, the first element of the first row has an index of 0, 0. Remember, indices always start at 0 and not at 1. So the first element of the first row has an index of 0 and 0. And we'll assign that element a value of 10. Now moving on to the second element of the first row, so we're still on the first row, an array, so still on the first row, but we're going to the next column, so 1, and we'll assign that a value of 12. Now we're moving to the second row, but we're staying on the first column. So second row, first column, an array, second row, but first column, and we'll assign a value of 20. Now still on the second row, but moving to the second column, so second row and second column, and we'll assign a value of 45. So now, just to test this, we're going to print out the values of the elements according to the index. So system.out.println, then we want to print out the following sentence: element 1 at index 0, 0. So obviously starting off at the on the first row, and then we need to add the variable of the element according to its index. So an array at 0, 0. Just to gain some time, we're going to copy this out and paste it 3 times, as we have 4 elements. So we've already done the first element on the first row, so let's now do the second element still on the first row. So 0 and 1. So still on the first row, but second column. Don't forget to change the indices here at the end. Now we're moving to the second row, but first column. So that's the first element of the second row. So second row, but first column. Again, don't forget to change the indices at the end. Now we're moving to the second element of the second row. So second row and second column, like so. So let's test this out by clicking on Run. And as you can see at the bottom, the values of the elements according to their indices are correctly displayed. So that's how you use a multi-dimensional array in Java.